Good day, everyone. I am really excited about our conversation today. I'm Laurie Battaglia, and I'm the CEO of Aligned at Work in Scottsdale, Arizona. Aligned at Work is a leadership development company that specializes in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And we're always trying to learn more things about accessibility and disabilities. So today I am honored to speak with Anessa Powell, who's the founder and CEO of AllAbility Solutions. Anessa and I were introduced by a mutual friend, Jen Litwin. So Jen, if you're out there, hey, and thank you. And we so enjoyed the conversation. So I got to meet Anessa probably right as she was starting her business.
Yeah.
And here we are a couple of years later. So Anessa, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and maybe even how you got here.
Oh my goodness. We don't have an hour. It's only an hour. We don't have enough time.
Right.
But first, just let me say thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this LinkedIn Live today. I have so been looking forward to this. And yes, Jen Litwin, if you're watching, thank you so much for this amazing connection. We really just hit it off when we spoke a few years ago. And my goodness, here we are. Things have definitely evolved over the years, and just excited to continue our conversation and really just spread the knowledge that you have been passionate about along with us and championing us for many years now. So again, thank you. For those watching, my name is Anessa Powell, founder and CEO of AllAbility Solutions. And we are what I like to say, a one-stop shop for all things disability related. We specialize in training, consulting, speaking engagements, and job placement. So like I said, anything regarding disability, please really just, think of us as that one-stop shop. So it has been quite a ride, shall we say. And, it's personal and professional for me, this work that I do. And I can share that because for me, when I was diagnosed back in 2013 with a rare autoimmune disease called Addison's disease, my life was forever changed. And it was an introductory into this world of invisible disabilities, or not apparent disabilities, as we call them, and what that meant for me being a mom and being working and how to balance all that. Would I be able to do that? And through learning and researching and networking, I quickly learned there was a whole world out there, such as myself, that really had so many capabilities and had gaps in my resume that businesses were not understanding why. And nor was I able to get my foot in the door to share what that was, because I was being overlooked because of those gaps and not having a chance to speak to that. So I could go much, much further on that. But many years further, flash forward, my husband and I launched AllAbility Solutions, and really out of a need that we felt that was really lacking within the disability community. There's some amazing talent out there for people that are disabled, having the opportunity to speak to that, to work in an environment where employees understand that and support them, and then it's just going to continue to grow. We can get into the community and what that means when it comes to hiring and supporting, but that's just a real brief glimpse into what's happened these past few years.
That was a fantastic overview because so I come out of the banking industry, so we love our statistics. And we have this thing titled 25% of your workforce has a disability, why it matters and how to lead. So it sounds like 1 in 4 people have a disability. And then I remember as we talked, you shared that 70% of the people who do, it's invisible.
Right.
So it's not like we know that somebody needs help or needs an accommodation or whatever it is that they need. So that's pretty incredible numbers.
Yeah, and I wish I could see people's faces, because when you share that statistic, so oftentimes people they just, their eyes light up and they're like, what do you mean 1 in 4 people, 25%? And honestly, it's 27% according to the CDC. And that number is going to continue to grow. And when you're talking about, to your point, non-apparent and visible disabilities, with 70% over that making up that particular statistics, with the largest piece being mental health, that's an eye-opening number that people really need to take into consideration.
Yeah. So you started the business during what I'll call the COVID years, right?
Yes.
The 2021. So And I believe we talked right after that. So I was talking at that time about how this was a great example because people were working from home. This was a great example of how accommodations could be made and people who wanted to work could work more easily if they could set up their environment and they didn't have the long commute and all those kinds of things. So say a few
Right.
things about that.
It was, as we joke within the community, it was a dream because there have been people that have been talking about it for decades about having the opportunity to be able to work from home and do it successfully. And when the pandemic hit and everyone went home and businesses were like, oh, well, we can do this. We can be able to continue to do what we've been working on. We're just doing it all remotely. And it was fantastic. And the need was just so great. And the disabled talent was getting hired because businesses were like, that's not a thing anymore. We absolutely can have you work from home and still get your job done. It was fantastic. And it was definitely the catalyst and part of why we launched AllAbility Solutions and being able to fit that need for businesses, especially during the job shortages that were happening as well. And as those return to office mandates are starting to go back in, we're seeing the trend kind of change. And what my fear is that businesses are going to forget that
Yes.
it still is an opportunity for you. Don't miss out on this talent because they need to have 100% remote work. Now, I am a people person. I love being in person. I love the opportunity to collaborate and having that fostering spirit, that coffee talk or the water cooler. I get it. However, I am also a person that lives with a disability. And as a part of my disability, fatigue can really just catch up with me. So I value and understand the need for those that really need to have remote work. What I encourage businesses to remember is that if you set those mandates in place, you're automatically going to eliminate a particular segment of your applicants if you say, nope, 100% in the office. Can you put into it and think out of the box and think we can work with you on a hybrid work model approach? How are we going to be able to get this talent and retain this talent if we can continue to have the conversations and ask those questions in the interviewing stage? What's going to make you most successful in doing this job? And I think that we just can't forget and lose sight of that. We're just a few years out and we can't have short memories. We have to be able to continue to foster that growth and that, what I like to say, compassion. But, sometimes compassion and business doesn't always go hand in hand. And that's what I try to encourage people to remember.
I'm here for it to have a more people-centered approach to business because I think that we're, we used to say in the old days, throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
That it seems like the pendulum always swings back and forth. Everybody's in, everybody's out, everybody's in again. And I'm like you, I think that there's alternatives out there. There's different ways to do this. I think too, as employers, if I don't have any geographical limits on me, let's take disability out of the conversation for a second. If I don't have any kind of geographic limits, I can hire anyone I want. It just makes good business sense. If someone has a disability and that commute, which for me could go up to an hour plus
Right.
for about 20 years of my life, it's grueling. And then the walk in and the sometimes the parking or you're on public transportation. As an able-bodied person, I know the stress and the pressure put on me. As someone with a disability, wow, it's just a lot. And I don't know why it would have to be this all or nothing thing that we're seeing this pendulum swing back.
Right.
So I'm here to say, employers, think about what you're really doing and whether it's that you need to see people in the office or whether you've got, shall we call it a lazy management style that insists on hovering over people and seeing them or they're not working. Because if that's the case, maybe you hired, incorrectly, or maybe you haven't set standards. There's a number of reasons for that.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And that could be a whole other topic, Laurie, honestly.
It could be, yes. We'll talk about that too. So when you started, you were AllAbility Recruiting.
We are.
And now you're AllAbility Solutions. So talk a little bit about what you saw in employers that caused you to sort of broaden out and do other things as well as recruiting.
Yes, we learned a lot. When you own a small business, you learn very quickly. And we adapted and pivoted, as I like to say, and rebranded now. We're now AllAbility Solutions. And what we found, Laurie, is that we definitely were more of the mindset of the job placement piece of that. But what we were finding is that, and running up against, is that businesses want to do the right thing. They do. They want to be able to be disability friendly, but they just didn't know how to begin. And as a part of that, there was such an education, really just a gap. And so our biggest piece was having the opportunity to speak with our companies and really just educate them and show them the importance and the reasons why they need to look at disabled talent and hire and support. So we quickly changed to training classes and consulting. And that for us really just embraced that whole model of that one-stop shop, as I mentioned before, and being able to support. So once you have the opportunity for them to learn, and then they soak up that knowledge and they're like, oh, I get it now. I understand when I'm looking around and I see my workforce and I understand that 1 in 4 people around me, 25% has a disability. Oh, and let's not forget our customers, right? 25% of our customers, and then they get it. And then they're more apt to say, okay, now we have the tools in place in order to hire, and we can support them because we help to create that for them, that whole landscape and navigating that roadmap from really just the application stage to the interviewing, to the hiring, and then to the onboarding, and then to support, because there's many layers to that. And that's can mean everything ranging from the accessibility piece to just the culture, which is so huge. That's the big piece of what we talk about. It all comes back to your culture and what you're creating within in the environment within your organization. So yes, we have pivoted. We're very excited about it. As of lately, it has been more around accommodations and ADA support. That's a big piece, and we can talk more about what that means. But for us in that consulting piece, for us, we've been very excited about the opportunities to help shape the right accommodations process and the steps when it comes to supporting their employees that are asking for those accommodations.
So do you work specifically with training like HR teams and things like that? And then also leaders? Is your audience everybody?
I was going to say everybody, anybody that
all the people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We have HR teams that reach out to us and say, we didn't have the necessary training in order to feel like we are supporting our employees when it comes to ADA or the accommodations piece. And then we have just managers that want to be more disability friendly with their teams, and then in turn their customers. So to my point, yes, anybody and everybody. Yes.
Yes. Look, occasionally we have people asking when we're working with clients, who can train us on the right way to select people? Who can train us on what we need to know? And they're bringing in the disability aspect of it and the accommodations. Talk to a little bit about when you and I were preparing, we talked about how mental health was one of the things that is an invisible disability. And I would say just neurodiversity is probably big in my world. I look at family members that have neurodiverse ways of processing things. And then I've got some good friends out there that I've met along the way that are on LinkedIn talking about it now. So we've sort of brought these, okay, I'll speak as a baby boomer here for a minute. We've brought these things that never got talked about out into the light of day, and finally, we're talking about them. But I'm asking myself, if I were still in the banking industry that I was, and I had someone on my team, what would I do? Where would I go? And I would turn to HR, even though I was part of HR as a learning and development person, and organizational development. I would turn to HR and say, help me with this. And I'm guessing that they're feeling like they never were given the tools, or people didn't talk about this. So any thoughts on that whole ramble there that I just did?
I have many thoughts.
Yeah.
First, to talk about the workforce in general. So you're looking at it from a baby boomer perspective. I'm a Gen Xer. I have children that are 19 and 16, so that's a whole other generation. And so you
One of them's on here saying hi, mama.
Right, that's my baby girl. She's at the University of Michigan. Hi, Annalise. Thank you for watching. Talk about a rising star. This one's coming up, people. So just mama plug there. There we go.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, though, with regards to the younger generation. So you have an opportunity to really learn and take a minute to learn who's coming into your workforce. You have this younger generation that has grown up with, as I joke, 504 plans, IEPs, and mama bears. They are used to advocating for themselves, and they're used to, quite honestly, being in an environment where they have the tools and resources that will provide for them. And they are looking for that in a workforce. They are looking to work for someone that is prepared to support them, especially when you're talking about neurodiversity. That's a huge piece. And it can oftentimes clash when you have the older generation who doesn't quite understand. We didn't have neurodiversity, that term per se, that was well known back when we were growing up. Yeah. We didn't really talk about that at all. And so you have kids that are well versed in talking about it, and they own it. That's their true authentic selves. And that's who you want to be working for you. And so how do you prepare yourself accordingly? How do you prepare your staff? And there's just some great opportunities to really soak up that knowledge, so you are creating an environment where they feel supported and they don't leave. And that's what we're finding, especially with a certain generation, that they only last about 30 days or 90 days with companies, because they're not being met. And that's just put it quickly. It's just the opportunity for them. It's not the environment that they thought they were going to be working in. So how do you get ahead of that? Mm-hmm. How do you create a team? And it comes back to your culture. It comes back to, and I always like to say this, I want it to be a point in time where disability is not a thing. It's not a thing when you look around the room and you have someone who is sitting there that is a wheelchair user. If you have someone that is using noise canceling headphones because they work more successfully and no one thinks a thing about it, my job would be done. And it wouldn't be a thing anymore. And that would just be the amazing world that we live in. And that's what I hope that the future will bring. Yes. And I'm very passionate about making that happen. And there are tons of allies out there that really envision the same way. And we do this by having conversations like this and educating and really just showing the need that's really going to continue to grow within companies.
Yeah, I think now that the cat is out of the bag, that there is no putting it back in again. And I don't think we should. As human beings, we have to look around and say, everybody doesn't think like me. Everybody doesn't act like me. How do I, as a leader, meet that person where they are? And if they need resources, get them for the person so that they can work. I think a lot of times, older generations, I know my son is Gen X, and we didn't have a name for things back then. You knew something was going on, but you couldn't figure out what was wrong. And it's not wrong. It's different.
That's right.
And there was not a way to name it. There was not a thing to do for it. So I'm kind of envious of millennials and Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, I think, is following Gen Z. So I'm kind of envious of them. I think they've got it right. And I believe that we, the older generations that didn't know what we didn't know, had it wrong, if we want to put it in terms of right and wrong. I think we have to get with it. And I believe that those younger generations are beginning to take over the volume of the workforce. So if we think we can put it off, we can't. We have to know about these things and take action.
Exactly. And think about when we're talking about financially and what that means for turnover rates and what that costs you, and being able to go out and interview and hire again and do the training again. Why not just do it right from the beginning? Have those practices and processes in place in order to support them so they don't leave. And you're creating an environment where your employees feel supported. And so they're going to be just supportive of your company. And my goodness, that just speaks to your bottom line.
It does. It does. And the other thing I think is a big factor that didn't used to be a factor is social media. That not only do we have, all the plans of the IEPs and the mama bears and all those things, but we have social media where if I'm angry at my employer, I can go right out there and air my dirty laundry in public. And now the employer is left to decide what to do about that. In the days before COVID, I worked for organizations that probably would have fired you for that. And now they can't really do that legally, I don't believe. If they can, they shouldn't. And it's a big factor that we have to deal with in our everyday life. How have you seen social media used for good? Do you have any stories that you can think of about how somebody was able to really do some things on social media that led to good outcomes?
Well, it's funny. So I am on TikTok, and I got on TikTok originally because my kids were on there, and I feel like that's really cool. But I have found it to be such an amazing voice for the disabled community and being able to share their stories and their experiences. And we use some of the videos that I have found in our training sessions where, we have this one example of this particular person that was treated awfully in a coffee shop. And what basically it was like what not to do. If you really want to get in trouble, don't do this. This was a fantastic video. She was deaf, and this was back when we were all masking, and that was such a challenging time for the deaf and hard of hearing community in wearing masks during that time. And it was a really great, phenomenal video. And I'm very cautious about that when I talk about videos, because I never want it to come from a place of, and this is a horrible word, but this is the only way that I can think to describe it. It's called inspiration porn. Terrible word, but that's the best way. The disabled community, unfortunately, you have videos that go out there that you're like, the people watch and they think of it as, oh my goodness, that just really touched my heart, and how sad for them, and oh, how we have to support them. And that's that inspiration piece of that. And that's what it's not about for us, especially within the community. It's about that true, authentic disability representation and really understanding the lived experience that someone has with a disability. And I think that's so important. So you can go on any social media between Facebook, Instagram, TikToks, just do the hashtag disabled and proud is a great one. Disability awareness, anything along those lines. If you want to start educating yourselves, and what I would like to say too, under that whole cautioning thing, is that when you're talking about the disability community, if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. No two disabilities are alike. And I think that's something that we always need to remember. If you've met someone who is blind, you've met someone who is blind. There are blind people that drive. There are blind people that need, assistance with canes. It just depends. And for me, for instance, with my rare autoimmune disease, I can assure you none of us have the same symptoms at the same time. It's a very different experience. So I encourage you to go out and educate yourself on what that means. And everyone has their own different lived experience, and never assume. Always ask. That's always my big push too, is just always ask if you want to understand more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting when I think about it. When I think about using social media for good, well, first of all, I hope we're using this for good, because it'll live on out there, both on LinkedIn and then on our YouTube channel, and you'll have a copy of it. So you can put it out there however you want to. But once it's out there, we've got the message out in other ways, and hopefully people share it. I follow a couple of people. I'm not going to really identify them because I haven't asked them, but they're out there for it. And they are putting their stuff out there saying, okay, I just realized I just got diagnosed with autism, for example. Mm-hmm. And that's a gentleman that I met at a conference. And he's like, I just got diagnosed with this. And it has become his mission while he works full time to educate people about what this means and sort of take us along on his journey of self-discovery. Because I think there's a lot of us that are seeing people's journeys and going, wait a minute, I do that too. Or I didn't know there was a name for that, or I didn't know. And then there's another woman that has about, oh my gosh, she must have 250,000 people following her now. And she talks about her mental health journeys and takes us along on her life journey, and is about to give birth. So there will be more to come with all of that. Absolutely. And so it's just, to me, reading people's stories on LinkedIn, it's so impactful. I know it can be draining for people to share their stories, but boy, I learned so much from having people tell it in their own words about what it's like to live with whatever it is they're living with, or to experience things in a certain way. And thank you for saying, it's just one person and everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just so key to keep in mind as people start learning more about the community and what that means. And Laurie, I'd love to go back to something that you had brought up earlier, and we were talking about that mental health piece and then more people getting diagnosed and what COVID did for that. It really changed things. That changed things for so many people for various reasons, right? You had businesses and companies that sent their workers out and they went home and they started COVID. And then during this process of working from home, people really started to learn a lot about themselves. And they have since gone through the opportunity to, really go through a diagnosis of and testing, because like I tell the story of this particular mom who was a part of, listening to her daughter. And she was online and she was taking school online. And she's like, this child cannot sit still and listen to this teacher. We probably have a potential ADHD diagnosis coming on. And her husband said to her, that's you. You can't do it either. And she's like, whoa, wait, do I have ADHD too? And so and I hear stories like this all the time. People really just like, wow, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my working style. I learned a lot about how I best work and how I can best be supported. And so now businesses are receiving all of these accommodations based upon that, because people are coming back into work, or they're really wanting to stay at home and to continue to work. Because, for instance, if you have someone, and I heard this the other day from a particular client, they had an employee request that they not be next to the kitchen because the smells and the talking utterly distracting, and they need to be in the back corner of the room. And that's what that person recognized when they were out working from home, is that they work so well in a really quiet environment and not having those distractions. So people have really had the opportunity to embrace who they are and and the ADHD community is growing by the numbers, leaps and bounds. There's not enough testers out there, honestly, right now to support the amount of people that are wanting to be going through that testing part and get diagnosed. So, I just think that that's so important for businesses to remember.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And by the way, I flashed a comment up there. I didn't actually intend to click on it, but I did because I saw it come up about the Starbucks plus ASU to be welcoming program.
That's great.
And how to access that. I'm seeing some interesting things in the comments that we probably want to comment on here. So, Majid,
first one says "Go Balls." I'm just like, although I grew up in Tennessee, Jonathan, so I have many friends and family members that are Vols fans. So we'll allow it. It's okay.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing we disabled don't want any sympathy. All we want is equity. Yes.
And it goes back to that point too of just not having it be because you feel sorry for someone. That's never ever what this is about. Pity, absolutely not. We are just as valid and worthy of being supported, and just equity, to his point, and having that opportunity. And it goes back to that interviewing phase. If you're automatically not having your or even your application phase for those jobs, if they're not accessible, then you're automatically eliminating. You're not having that talent being able to reach you. So yeah, absolutely, to this point.
Yep. And I'm seeing Robert, as a deaf architect, I'm not a handicap, working all my life with professionals.
Yeah.
And I see that Jonathan is in Knoxville.
There he is, right in the heart of it.
Yes. So if you do have any questions and you're watching this live, please feel free to put them in the comments, because here in StreamYard, we can see the comments as they go by. We just can't comment back. My assistant Fawn is out there masquerading as me. So if you see something come through from Laurie, just know that that's Fawn doing her thing in the background, as we agreed to, beforehand. But so feel free to ask us any questions. We're probably going to go another 10 to 15 minutes maximum. So if you've got a burning question, please do feel free to put it there. Now, let me roll down and make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, there we go. So talk a little bit about the ROI of this for companies. So let's pretend for a minute that it's not just the right thing to do. And because it is. And let's put it in the numbers. What is it costing companies? What's the ROI to this thing? Why should they do it?
The big number that I want people to remember is $13 trillion. And what I mean by that is the disability community, along with their friends and allies, they have the spending power of 13 trillion. And the numbers speak to themselves when companies are known as disability friendly. They are known as providing, whether it be accessible products, you name it, because the disabled community is hungry for the opportunities to support businesses that they know will support them. So I'll use this as an example recently with regards to accessible clothing. That is a huge new trend that is happening with regards to making sure that products that are being produced are accessible for especially the aging population. And I would say QVC, Curate Retail Group, they're doing an amazing job in this space, providing that. And when they provide, like for instance, when you have a shirt and you don't have to worry about buttoning it, but it's magnetized, you still can have a professional shirt with a collar that looks amazing. It's just not buttons, it's magnets. Now think of how cool that is if you're someone who has chronic pain and you can't button a shirt very well, but you still want to look great. Why is it taking so long for this to come out? And the retailers are starting to wake up to this. Skechers is another great opportunity to understand. They just released their brand of shoes that slip on, but they're still cute and fashionable and functional. And they're meeting the need for so many people who can't tie their shoes.
Yes.
Really just take note of that opportunity that is out there. And that's just one piece. I was talking about retail in general because that seems to really resonate with people. But when you're talking about digital accessibility, huge. Think about it when regards to speech to text, right? That was really created for the disabled community, but now so many people use it. And that goes back to that universal design approach too. When you think about it, for instance, curb cuts in the sidewalk were created and intended originally for wheelchair users. However, if you've ever pushed a stroller, if you have ever pushed a shopping cart, you're looking for a curb cut in order to navigate sidewalks and streets. So that is the approach, and how accessibility is universal for all. And it's such an amazing thing to keep in mind. And I'm really excited about the technology that's going to be coming out in these next few years. There's some really great people in this space trying to provide that accessible technology piece. And I think that the environment is right and people are desperate for it, and it's going to just continue to grow. So if you want to be a part of that and look your bottom line increase, start taking note now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, someone who's aging, I know it may not be obvious to people, but yes, I am. And it's a great equalizer because suddenly that curb cut is welcome because maybe your hip's hurting that day or your lower back is out or whatever. I think it's really interesting when somebody who's lived in I'll just say, doesn't have a physical disability of some sort, is able-bodied, whatever that means. By the way, in the comments, if I'm saying any terminology wrong, I'm here for the education. So please do comment, or Anessa, call me out on it. So if I'm fully abled and I'm suddenly in a boot, that's a big equalizer. If I'm suddenly, like, I break an arm or I can't use my dominant hand or something happens, all these things make us a little bit more aware of what it's like to not be able to do certain things at certain times. So I think everybody should have something minor happen to them so that they get a bit of empathy about those kinds of things.
And I just want to touch on that. When that happens and you break a foot or an arm, to your point, you're part of the disabled community at that point. Disabilities are not always permanent. They can be temporary, they can be situational, and they can be permanent as well. So that's something to keep. And you can have all of the above. Like, for instance, I have a permanent disability, but a few years ago, I was in a boot for 6 weeks because I slipped and strained all the ligaments in my ankle. So that was a temporary disability too. So, I think that's a very important point that you bring up, is that when we do this work and we have these conversations, so oftentimes it's very personal for people, and the people that are driving these conversations within their organizations is because it is personal. It's how do you meet those that haven't at that point in their lives been in touch or is truly within on a day-to-day basis with someone within the disability community. And what I always tell I want to share is that at one point in your life, you will be affected by disability, whether it's yourself or it is a loved one or a close friend and family member. So just keep that in mind, that if you want to make sure that you are considered supportive and you want to be able to be looked at as an ally, start educating yourself now and really just learn what that means as a part of the community itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, because it happens to everybody sooner or later. My mother used to say, "Oh, your day will come." And I feel like it was the mother's curse,
Yes.
that, yes, my day's here. So, yeah, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Jennifer's got a great question there. What are the effective
Hi,
ways for
Jennifer.
people, to continue learning about and supporting the disability community? So you mentioned allyship. So what can people do, and where should they go for resources?
Well, Jennifer
Call
knows
you.
this because she is a dear friend. You call AllAbility Solutions first.
Yes, I
No, but I
agree.
really just encourage you, if this is new to you, to start really reading and researching. And to your point, Laurie, start following people that you've seen pop up potentially in your feed or comments about, I talk about neurodiversity, or I do this for a living, but I've been diagnosed with depression. Really start learning what that means and how having the opportunity to share that back. Then that's the biggest piece. Is yes, you have the information, but what are you doing with it? If you now know that it's so vital for your business and for your organization and for the community that you're in, start sharing those information. Start inviting guest speakers in. Training sessions are huge. I think every organization should have a training session, a disability training session. And the biggest key to that is don't just have it and then you're like, well, that was great. All right, let me put the papers in my desk and move along. No,
Right.
it's having it embedded and continuing to talk about it. This month is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. This is a great time. Now, granted, we're on the last day, but this is a great time to keep talking about it. December 3rd is International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Are you talking about it then? And when I say talking about it, it's not only externally, obviously, for your organization and your business, but it's also internally. Are you highlighting disabled voices? Are you encouraging them and creating that environment where they feel comfortable in talking about their disabilities so others can learn from it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's sort of like, once the jar is open, we shouldn't go back and tamp it down again. I think once the jar is open and we see these things, it's one of those things where you want to keep on talking about it and keep on looking at resources and get the right terminology and ask people what they need, all the things. Let me look here and see if we missed anything. Is there anything you can think of that we missed?
Well, I just wanted to add is that so oftentimes what happens, Laurie, is that businesses know they should start, but they're so afraid of doing it wrong. And the
Yes.
worst thing they can do is do nothing at all. When you have a workforce, if you've got 25%, why would you not want to be able to support 25% of your workforce? And then why in the world would you not want to support 25% of your customers that you serve? That is such a huge piece. And so, yes, I know it can be fearful, but there are tools and resources such as us to be able to help you with those steps in order to make that happen and not be afraid. You can't eliminate risk. You cannot, but you can mitigate it. And start it now and start that process now. So your company and the culture that you are creating is just going to be able to provide an environment where you're known as supporting your employees that are disabled and being able to be known as disability friendly. And who wouldn't want that? Because that's just a phenomenal thing to be known as.
Right. I agree. Fawn, in the background there, could you help us out by putting up the website for AllAbility Solutions so that people can get that URL there? Pretty simple, allabilitysolutions.com. So let's definitely take a look at that website. Lots of good things there. And then if people want to get a hold of you, Anessa, what's the best couple of ways to get a hold of you?
They can email me there at anessa@allabilitysolutions.com, or on LinkedIn is great. I find that LinkedIn is such a powerful networking opportunity. So feel free to shoot me a message as well if you have any questions. And I don't want people to be afraid of this. I think people do, going back to that, they're just afraid of saying the wrong thing, of doing it wrong. And it's it's just a growing community. And as I joke with people, like if they are temporarily injured, I'm like, welcome to the community you never wanted to join.
Yes.
And don't be fearful of it. It's vast and it's growing, and it's something that businesses really just should start taking note of it today.
Yeah. And I, like you, am here for the long game of maybe eventually it'll be such a natural thing we don't have to even call it out, but we are nowhere near that right now. We're at the beginning of the journey, I think.
That's right.
Definitely. Okay. So anything I missed? Anything that we do want to talk about before we hang up today?
I did just want to note, and just going back to your baby boomer conversation, what you had mentioned before is that this is a huge statistics that I actually just saw yesterday in an article that I was reading, going back to that accessible technology piece. By 2050, 2.4 billion people are going to be age 60 and above. So think about that when you are talking about the aging population, and how, if you're in the tech field and you're listening to this, get on this now. That's the short of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned universal design, and I have a friend, Esther, that does a lot with universal design. Is that what it's called? Where it's so that it's accessible to everybody.
Yeah. A part of that was created for the community. However, it's universal for all. It's like, for instance, that voice to text and captions and subtitles, going back to that. And if you're doing videos and producing videos within your organization, always have them as standard. That should always be, no matter what, because it's not for just people who are hard of hearing or deaf. It's for people who are also neurodivergent, and it's also for people who have just short attention spans like myself. And it's just easier for me to follow along. I'm a visual learner, and if I can see the captions in front of me, it's so much easier for me to understand and really just take in that information. So that's another great piece to keep in mind.
Good point. And I know some people are using their note takers to really supplement their own situations and how to stay in tune and get the notes and make sure they have it later. So you see more note takers in meetings and things like that too. I think there's a lot that we can do. And of course, that opens up a whole different conversation about, confidentiality and all those things, but it really does help people.
Well, so it really is such a great organizational tool. Like for myself, when I'm in a conversation, I'm really focusing on being able to listen and respond, but I don't always remember. And that, unfortunately, is just a part of the disease with the brain fog sometimes. And that is just fantastic for people to be able to support them. That's another great tool. And that could be another accommodation piece that is at no cost. And I just want to add, when it comes to accommodations, and this is where businesses also get very scared, it's like, oh my goodness, this is going to cost me so much money. No, over 90% of accommodations cost less than $500.
Wow.
Yes. And so easily can support employees based upon that.
It always amazes me in business how we think if we don't talk about it, it's not really there.
Yeah, that's right. And guess what? It's not going away. It's just going to
no, it's not. It's going to get more and more prevalent, I think, as people find ways to name what's going on for them and bring it out into the light of day. So I hope we did that today. Again, I appreciate everybody being here. We've had some nice active comments. It's always nice when that happens.
Thank you, Patty.
Yeah, thank you. And so with that, we're going to send you off to the day. Any last words here, Anessa, before we hang up?
No, thank you, Laurie, so much for having me. I hope this was an opportunity for others to learn. If this is new to you, I'm excited you're here, because that's the first step, is really just having the opportunity to learn and soak up that information. There's a lot out there, and I hope that going forth, you'll share that knowledge now.
Okay. Thank you. I hope we've made a difference. So thank you, everybody who's on live. Thanks to everybody who's listening to this later, because you can't always get here when you want to. And with that, just be aware that there's all kinds of folks out there in the world, and we're here for each other. So thanks for taking the time, and thanks for everybody that's on. Have a great day.
Bye.